Hello my friends, and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering my pick for the best Sorcerer build in Baldur's Gate 3. This is an update video to my previous video of the same name, because the mechanics of Sorcerer have changed significantly in patches over the lifespan of the game, and so I thought it would be very important to update my Sorcerer build to be consistent with how the game works in the modern era, and to focus in on the incredible power that Sorcerer can bring to the table for your Honor Mode runs. So what do Sorcerers bring to the table? Well, the answer is raw power. Sorcerer is, in my opinion, the single strongest character class in Baldur's Gate 3, because the core concept of Sorcerer is inherently broken. Sorcerer's class abilities revolve around manipulating the action economy, taking multiple turns within a single turn, which is one of the most powerful things that you can do. The action economy in Dungeons & Dragons is the concept of how many actions are you taking versus how many actions your opponents are taking, at least relevant actions. Sorcerer's entire class revolves around taking more actions in a single turn, and having those actions be more impactful within a single action than other classes. So it does one of the most powerful things that you can possibly do, and can often be as effective as 2 or even 3 other characters would be in the same amount of time, because it's able to just simply cast more spells than another character would be able to cast, to do more things than another character would be able to do, and can overpower your enemies with sheer force of numbers, all within a single character. Sorcerers also benefit from being significantly easier to play than most other spellcasters. Their relatively narrow spell selection, because you have to actually choose your spells as you level up, means fewer decisions that you have to make during play, and because Sorcerers have Constitution save proficiency, even if you mess up your positioning and get them hit by an enemy, they won't lose concentration on their spells as often, which makes them much more forgiving than many other caster classes. Even despite their relatively low hit points, Sorcerers also get great positioning and defensive options, which makes them a very smooth character to play through Honor Mode or Tactician Mode or high difficulties, and in my opinion the best spellcaster to play if you're relatively new to the game, because it will make it easier for you to make decisions, and also the best spellcaster to play if you are just looking for the most powerful character for your party. Sorcerers are excellent. I'm using the Halfling Hireling as the example character here, because Halfling has special synergy with Sorcerer as a race pick. Halflings get the ability to re-roll natural ones that they roll on a 20-sided die, including on saving throws, and that includes concentration saves. Sorcerers will very often want to be concentrating on a spell, and if they take damage they might lose concentration on that spell, but because they're extremely good at concentration saves with proficiency and high constitution, normally that will only happen if you roll a natural 1 or 2, and Halfling's ability to re-roll natural 1s means many fewer concentration checks that you are going to fail. That means that Halflings can safely concentrate on important spells like haste without any danger of losing them much more easily than other characters can, and therefore make excellent sorcerers. Other great options for sorcerers include any race that gets shield or armor proficiencies, because sorcerers naturally don't have those, and there are many good light armors and shields that are really excellent for sorcerers. In particular, half wood elf, which gets shield and light armor proficiency and also 35-foot movement speed, is an excellent pick, because that will allow you to move faster, which is very important for a character that wants to stay out of range of enemies. It also has special synergy with some of the sorcerer's abilities, while wearing a shield and light armor to make your armor class better. Another great option is Dwergar, because you can become invisible out of combat, they're always excellent, or Githyanki, who get medium armor, which can increase your armor class even more, as well as once per day Misty Step, and the ability to have all intelligence skills proficient, which will help you in dialogue checks. Sorcerers are likely to be your party face, so the ability to make knowledge checks in conversations can be very helpful, and Githyanki can do that. So those are my picks for races, but Halfling I think is a really excellent choice for a sorcerer and is my recommendation. For our ability scores, we get to keep things very simple and take a very standard attribute split. We're going to take 16 Charisma, it's our primary casting stat, so we need that as high as possible, and 16 Constitution, because we want high hit points and high Constitution saves, so we can maintain concentration on our spells. We're going to drop Intelligence to 8, because we don't need that at all, go to 14 Dexterity, and then put our last 2 points in Wisdom to make sure we have a high Wisdom saving throw, which is the most important saving throw in the game. For our skills, we are going to ensure that you have Persuasion, which you can do either by selecting it at character creation or taking a background that gives it to you, and then probably take additional skill proficiencies in dialogue skills as well. Sorcerers are only likely to need charisma skills to give you the best options for various conversations. That's what they're most likely to be doing as their skill checks, and don't really need any other skills. So I recommend putting all of your points into these. Another option is you could take 17 Charisma and 10 Wisdom, so do this and plan to get the Actor feat. If you do that, you'll get Expertise in Deception and Performance, and if you intend to do that, don't select those 2 skills, because the Actor feat will give those to you regardless, but just to keep things simple, we're going to go with the very basic split for this example. Next, we have to make the most important decision that we're going to make when building our sorcerer, what kind of sorcerer we're going to be. Sorcerers choose their subclass at level 1, which is actually a pretty significant advantage, because it means that not only do you get your class abilities just from being a sorcerer at first level, you also get subclass abilities starting right from the beginning of the game. Since these abilities are so powerful, getting access to them right away really powers up the character overall, and so it's really good that we get to pick our subclass so early, and choosing the right one can make a significant difference in how powerful your sorcerer is. There's 3 sorcerer subclasses. Wild magic is based on randomness and causes random things to happen, and so because this one is going to mostly disrupt your plans, you can safely discount it if you're trying to build the most powerful character. Wild magic sorcerer is super fun, but also very risky, and so we're going to avoid it since we're just trying to make the most powerful sorcerer that we can. Draconic Sorcerer does the most damage of any of the 3 sorcerer subclasses, but requires you to focus in on a single element, which can somewhat restrict your character's play. So if you just want raw damage, check out my Fire Sorcerer build for Draconic Sorcerer, but for the best overall Sorcerer, we're going to go with Storm Sorcery. Storm Sorcery seems like it's going to focus on lightning damage, but despite being a lightning-themed character, what it actually gives you is just some of the most powerful and versatile subclass features in the entire game, as well as access to many of the best spells in the game, without having to spend spells known slots on them. So it makes your sorcerer significantly more versatile if you're a Storm Sorcerer. You get to just know spells that you would have had to learn, because the Storm Sorcerer just learns more spells than the other Sorcerer variants, and so that gives you quite a leg up in terms of being able to react to many situations. At level 1, Storm Sorcerer gets Tempestuous Magic, which is one of the top 5 or so class abilities in the entire game, let alone ones that appear at level 1. Whenever you cast a level 1 spell or higher, you can fly as a bonus action, and that flight doesn't provoke opportunity attacks. That means that enemies who are next to you, you can always cast a spell and then just leave. You never have to take an attack of opportunity from them. And it lets you reposition to high ground where enemies can't get to you, infinitely fly out of combat if you have any ritual spell, any spell that doesn't cost a spell slot to cast. So Tempestuous Magic just gives you an enormous amount of versatility and positioning power for your character. It's one of the best abilities in the game, and is a significant draw, and why I recommend going with Storm Sorcery. And finally, we have to choose our level 1 spells. For our cantrip selection, we are going to go with Ray of Frost as our main combat spell. You typically only need 1 damage spell, 1 damage cantrip for your sorcerer. You might think you want multiple elements to be able to swap between elements, but mostly that won't come up, and if you do come up against an enemy who's immune to cold damage, you can simply use a higher level spell in order to hurt that enemy. Ray of Frost is one of the best combat cantrips in the game, second only to Warlock's Eldritch Blast, because It does 1d8 cold damage, which is very slightly less than Firebolt, but slowing the target's movement speed is extremely relevant, especially in the early game, and can definitely keep you alive. You can also double the damage because it's cold damage, so any enemy who's wet, who's been hit by a Create Water from your Cleric or a water bottle that's been thrown at them, will take double damage from all cold and lightning damage, which is an important concept that we are going to talk about a lot as we go through this Sorcerer build. And finally, it can be used to freeze puddles of water on the ground. This is an incredible utility option because ice surfaces in Baldur's Gate are ludicrously powerful. An enemy on an ice surface has to make a dex save or fall prone, and if they do that on their turn, they just lose the rest of their turn. So this lets you effectively, if there's a large puddle of water on the ground, it can let you stun an entire group of enemies for only a single cantrip action just by freezing the ice under them and making them slip and fall when they try to come after you. So Ray of Frost is incredibly powerful. Next, we're going to take Minor Illusion. This is maybe the best cantrip in the game. It may even be the single best spell in the game because it has just such a wide variety of uses. You can use it to steal things by distracting NPCs, or group enemies for AoE fights, pull individual enemies away from their allies to assassinate them on their own. The number of uses for this spell are limited only by your creativity, so I recommend getting used to it. Next, we are going to take Mage Hand, because Mage Hand gives you the ability to set up a lot of things. You can only use it once per day, unlike these other cantrips, but it is still extremely powerful. One trick that you can use, for example, is to drop a healing potion or a bottle of water at your feet, and then the Mage Hand can throw that at an enemy or an ally. So you can use the Mage Hand basically as a whole extra character in combat. And then finally, for our last cantrip, we're going to take Friends. Friends is very useful for any character that's going to be doing dialogue checks. It is dangerous to take on Honor Mode because it counts as committing a crime when you cast Friends, but there's two ways around this. Either you only use it against characters you were going to fight anyways, and there's a lot of times you'll be making a dialogue check to make a subsequent combat easier or something, and Friends can help with that. Or you just leave immediately after the conversation, because if you leave immediately and then wait a minute, the crime will go away. So Friends is just very powerful. If you don't like doing either of those things, then you can drop access to Friends and pick up another utility spell like Light or Dancing Lights. Either of those are good. For our spell selection at this level, we are going to take Chromatic Orb as our combat spell. Chromatic Orb lets you choose any one of the elements, so you can always have the right element, and lets you create ice surfaces on the ground, just like with Ray of Frost, with the ice version, or just do a ton of damage with the other damaging versions of Chromatic Orb. It's also AoE if enemies are close to each other, and is therefore just the best level 1 combat spell. And for our second spell, we're going to take Shield. Shield is an incredible defensive reaction that will help keep your character alive much more easily, and you absolutely want it on every sorcerer. That's our level 1 build. Let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we get to learn one more spell, and we also get access to our first two metamagic features. Metamagic lets sorcerers spend sorcery points, which you get one of per sorcerer level, and can also turn spell slots into, for more of them if you need more, in order to affect your spells in some way. In this case, we get access to Twin Spell, one of the most powerful features in the entire game, because it lets you spend sorcery points to cast 2 spells for the price of 1 action. That is double the spells for a single action, so where other characters are casting only 1 spell, we're already casting 2 at 2nd level, which just lets us completely overwhelm enemies with the number of actions that we can take. Absolutely mandatory, one of the most powerful features in the game. Twin Spell is definitely what you're taking as your first metamagic pick. Our second one is less 100% set in stone. Both Distant Spell and Extended Spell are quite good. I personally favor Distant Spell quite a bit because you will often want to be hanging way back from combat, and so the ability to cast a spell for only a single sorcery point, it's relatively cheap. The ability to cast a spell on a turn you wouldn't otherwise have been in range is very useful, but Extended Spell is also good because it can lock down enemies for more turns. I find that sorcerers are really good at ending combats quickly though, so Extended Spell comes up less often, but either of these are reasonable picks depending on what you want. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to take Magic Missile, which is just absolutely mandatory for any caster that can pick it up. Magic Missile never misses. It will work 100% of the time unless the enemy has shield, and you can split it across multiple enemies to finish off low health enemies, so it's extremely valuable for that. There's also lots of combats where you just need to do some damage to a few things guaranteed. You can also just focus in on a single enemy for a whole bunch of damage. Magic Missile is just an incredibly versatile and powerful combat spell, and definitely required for most casters, so we're going to pick it up here. At character level 3, we get access to second level spells, which is where things start to get really exciting, as well as even more meta magic options. For our meta magic choice, there's only one choice that makes sense, and that is going to be Quicken Spell. Lets you spend 3 sorcery points to cast a spell as a bonus action. Right now, that's pretty expensive, because we only have 3 sorcery points base, although remember, you can turn spell slots into more sorcery points if you need to. But later on down the line, Quicken Spell is going to become incredibly important, and if you both Quicken and Twin a spell in the same turn, you are effectively casting 3 spells in a single turn, which lets you triple the number of actions another character would be taking. Quicken Spell is awesome, and again, one of the reasons that sorcerers are just so incredibly powerful. For our spells known at this level, we are going to take another damaging combat spell, which we're a little heavy on right now, but it's really good to have these for the early game to make sure that you can contribute reasonably in combat. And the spell that we're going to take is Cloud of Daggers. Cloud of Daggers, like Magic Missile, is 100% reliable, it never misses, enemies don't get to make a save against it, and it will always do 4d4 slashing damage. And what's not intuitive about Cloud of Daggers is that not only is it the best AoE damage spell at level 2, it's also the best single target spell. It will do 10 average damage when you cast it, and then 10 average damage at the beginning of the enemy's next turn, for 20 damage, even if you only hit a single enemy with it, with no save and no hit roll. So even against only one enemy, this is the best damaging spell at level 2, and against multiple enemies, it's not even close. You will be able to wipe entire encounters if you can keep enemies trapped in Cloud of Daggers. That's it for our level 3 selections. Let's move on to level 4. At character level 4, we get access to our very first feat, and there are really 2 different directions that we could go with which feat we take. We could either increase our charisma by taking an ability improvement to go from 16 to 18, or by taking actor to go from 17 to 18 if we started with 17 or picked up Ethel's hair for charisma, or we could increase our initiative by taking alert. Initiative is incredibly important in Dungeons & Dragons and in Baldur's Gate 3, because if you go first, there's a very good chance your enemies won't get a chance to go at all. Especially with a sorcerer who's so good at unloading multiple spells in a turn, going first and just wiping the floor with the enemies before they ever get to act is exactly what you want to do. For this reason, I highly recommend going with Alert for this character, especially because you'll notice with our spell selection, we've taken several spells that don't have attack rolls or saving throws at all. That means that we don't actually use our charisma for our spells that much at this point, and can highly benefit from going first, especially on Honor Mode, where it'll make this character's run through the game much, much smoother. If you are interested in higher dialogue skills, though, it will certainly not hurt your character that much to delay Alert and take Actor at this level, but for the most powerful version of the character, you definitely want the higher initiative early. We also get to add an additional cantrip to our character, and we're going to take another combat cantrip. I know I said you only want 1 damage cantrip typically, but in this case, we're taking one that's effectively a utility cantrip as well. Bone Chill prevents enemy healing, which can be very powerful against enemies in the game that are going to heal. Against, for example, an enemy with regeneration who heals every turn, Bone Chill can deal not only the damage that it does, but also plus 10 or 20 or 30 damage just by stopping them from healing for 1 turn, which means that often Bone Chill is going to be a ridiculous amount of damage for a cantrip. In addition, it gives undead disadvantage on their attack rolls for an entire turn, which is very powerful, and we're about to be facing a lot of undead. Neither of these effects have a saving throw at all, you just have to hit with the spell, so it's very reliable for turning off enemy healing, giving undead disadvantage. It's very nice to have Bone Chill in your party. For our spell selection, if you have watched a lot of my build guides previously, you are anticipating that I'm going to say every character should have access to Misty Step, and so we should take Misty Step. That's mostly true, but this character is a Storm Sorcerer, and effectively gets Misty Step every time they cast a spell. Our Storm Sorcerer Tempestuous Flight feature means that whenever we cast a leveled spell, we get to fly 30 feet as a bonus action. So Misty Step is still very good for this character, and is one that you can absolutely pick up, and it won't be a bad choice, obviously. Misty Step is always amazing. But this character can actually get away with not taking it much better than any other character. In fact, the spell selection I'm going to recommend is to maximize your Tempestuous Flight power by taking a ritual spell. Any spell that doesn't cost a spell slot to cast can let you fly with Tempestuous Flight at will out of combat. And so we're going to take Disguise Self, Featherfall, or Enhance Leap. I'm going to recommend Disguise Self because there's a lot of encounters with dialogue where this can come up in dialogue, and it also makes you better at buying stuff from merchants. And remember that Disguise Self is a ritual. You can cast it outside of combat to trigger Tempestuous Flight, and that just gives you infinite out-of-combat flight. Very useful to get into certain positions before combats start in order to make sure to maximize the power of your character without spending any resources. If you aren't interested in that, you can also just take Misty Step or a combat spell like Scorching Ray, or a utility spell like Invisibility, but I really like having the ritual spell available on a Storm Sorcerer, so we're going to pick up Disguise Self at this level. At character level 5, we get access to 3rd level spells, which are some of the very best in the entire game. 3rd level spells are where you hit a huge power spike on spellcasters, and there's really an embarrassment of riches here. We kind of want all of the 3rd level spells in the game, but unfortunately can't pick all of them. At level 5, we can take up to 2 if we use a spell replacement, and one of them is almost certainly going to be Haste. Sorcerers can twin cast Haste using their sorcery points, meaning you can cast it on 2 party members. You can even cast it on yourself and another party member in order to just fire off lots of cantrips in a turn, or lots of chromatic orbs plus be hasted, and the amount of additional actions you get from haste is just ludicrous. Even on honor mode, where martial characters only get 1 additional attack with haste, just hasting 2 fighters is still 2 extra attacks every turn, and hasting a warlock or something doubles their effectiveness completely, so haste is just incredibly powerful. The other really important spell is Counterspell at this level, because Counterspell just lets you shut down the most dangerous thing that an enemy can do, a high-level spell cast. But we're going to delay taking Counterspell for 1 turn, because we don't actually have any spells at this point that we want to replace, though if there are any here that you find you just aren't using, go ahead and replace them with Counterspell now. Next level, we'll get a lot more freedom as to what spells to pick up or replace, because we're just going to learn a lot of free spells. So let's go ahead and do that and go to level 6. Because at level 6 Storm Sorcerer, we get to learn 5 free spells, which is extremely helpful. We learn Create Water, which we can now use to quicken Create Water and then zap an enemy with a lightning spell in order to just do enormous amounts of damage to them. We also learn Sleet Storm, which lets us make a massive AoE ice surface, causing enemies to fall over, and Thunderwave, which is a pretty good emergency option to push enemies away from you, especially because when you cast it, you then get to fly. We also get the class features of just increasing our lightning and thunder damage, and gaining resistance to lightning and thunder damage. These are both relatively minor boosts, but definitely nice to have. For our spell selection at this level, because we got access to Create Water, we have some of the really important spells in the game, we're going to go ahead and pick up Lightning Bolt, so now we can do Quicken Create Water on an enemy plus Lightning Bolt for double damage, and that's just an incredible amount of damage. We also now have a good concentration damage spell in Call Lightning, so we're going to replace Cloud of Daggers, because we have Call Lightning that we just learned, and we're going to go ahead and replace that with Counterspell. This gives us a great mix of spells known that lets us adapt to any situation. You have AoE Lockdown with Sleet Storm, Counterspell to stop enemies, Lightning Bolt to just blast them, or Haste to support your party. All of those are level 3 spells, so we're a little level 3 spell heavy, but you still have Magic Missile and Chromatic Orb just for lower level combat spells. That's it for level 6. Let's go on to level 7. At character level 7, we get access to 4th level spells. And 4th level spells are less immediately exciting than 3rd level spells. There's a lot of really strong 3rd level spells in the game, and 4th level spells, often what you're going to be doing is just upcasting a 3rd level spell. But there's still some 4th level spells that are really nice to have. The two that you're really going to be choosing between here are going to be Ice Storm for another ice surface, just some damage and an ice surface, or the three, excuse me, that you're going to be choosing between are Ice Storm, Wall of Fire, and Confusion. Confusion's a great AoE disable. You can also cast it into melee because it doesn't affect your allies, and so you can just shut down a whole encounter with it. This lets you create an ice surface, but we're already pretty good at that, so I generally, because we have Sleet Storm, so I think we don't usually need Ice Storm. And overall, the spell that I like the most here is Wall of Fire. If you don't have access to it elsewhere in your party, there's just some encounters that this wins on its own. Any encounter where enemies are coming towards you in a narrow corridor, or where enemies just have to approach your party, Wall of Fire instantly wins, so it's great to have in a party. If you have access to it on another character, though, go ahead and take Confusion at this level. We don't need to replace anything because our spell list is perfect, so let's move on to level 8. And at character level 8, we get access to another feat. The feat that we're going to take is an ability improvement, just to boost our charisma up to 18. Maxing out our charisma is very important for this character, so we are going to do that, especially because we now have a lot more spells with hit rolls or saving throws, so we really do want to increase our spell save DC. For our second of our two... For our additional spell that we get at 4th level, I am going to suggest going back for a lower level spell, because our spell selection is slightly top heavy at this point. We have a lot of higher level spells and not as many lower level spells. So depending on what you feel like your party is really needing, you can pick up Misty Step if you just do want more mobility. You can pick up Hold Person, which is very good for lockdown and can be twinned against multiple enemies. And especially because by this point in the game, you'll probably be able to boost your save DCs very high. Hold Person is very good and can really shut down a lot of enemies because it can be used with higher level spell slots to hit multiple enemies for multiple turns, or you could just take a reasonable combat spell like Scorching Ray or Ice Knife if you feel like you just need a one-shot damaging spell from lower levels. I'm going to recommend Hold Person because there's some encounters that this just instantly wins because of how it works with sorcerers. It's just a very, very powerful spell, and will get even better as we get access to our meta magic features that we're going to pick up as we level. Character level 9, we get our 5th level spell access, and 5th level spells for sorcerers are honestly a little bit disappointing. There's not that much here that we're really excited to pick up, but definitely Hold Monster is still very powerful, because for all the same reasons that Hold Person is. It can target anything except an undead and just lock it down completely, so it just wins a lot of encounters on its own. Very powerful spell. Or you can take a high-level damage spell. This is also a good point to pick up a utility spell if you feel like there's something your party is missing, like greater invisibility, enhance ability to pass more skill checks, that kind of thing from lower levels. Another option here, because you're very likely to be in high-level robes, is just to pick up Mage Armor, because you can increase your AC with Mage Armor. Typically, I prefer to just use Scrolls of Mage Armor rather than actually learn it, and just not get hit in general, but because it's so expensive. But because we now have all of the core spells that we need, going back for Mage Armor at this point isn't a terrible idea either, and can increase your survivability in the endgame. For now, though, we're just going to pick up Hold Monster. Finally, at character level 10, we get access to our last meta magic feature, and the one that we are going to take is going to be Heightened Spell. This gives you costs 3 sorcery points, so it's quite expensive to use, but gives enemies disadvantage on the saving throw. Heightened Spell on Hold Person or Hold Monster is just ridiculously powerful. Will just completely take enemies out of the fight, and you can also use it with something like Sleet Storm or Confusion to just fully lock down an entire encounter. Very, very powerful to give enemies disadvantage on saving throws. They will basically always fail them. For our spell selection at this level, if we haven't gone back to pick up something like Mage Armor or other utility, we're going to grab that at this point. It just makes your life a little bit easier, especially in the endgame, makes enemies less likely to target you. And then for our cantrip selection, we're going to take True Strike to annoy people in the comments of this video. Then things get exciting again. I know that we have had a couple levels where the spells were sort of not that enticing, but at character level 11, we get access to 6th level spells, which obviously are some of the most powerful in the entire game. The subclass feature Storm's Fury is unfortunately not very good, although being able to push enemies away when you're hit by a melee attack can help keep you alive. Ideally, though, you just don't get hit by a melee attack, so this won't come up that often. But the real draw here is that we get access to 6th level spells. There are two 6th level spells that I think are incredibly important for a sorcerer. The first is going to be Chain Lightning, which even though you can no longer twin it, that was changed in patch 6, you can still quicken it and then cast another Chain Lightning if you can refresh the spell slot somehow. Or you can quicken it alongside another spell. It still just also wins encounters on its own because of how much damage it does, and because we're a Storm Sorcerer, it's incredibly powerful. And the second is Globe of Invulnerability, if your party doesn't have access to this elsewhere. If you don't have access to Globe of Invulnerability, you should just pick Globe of Invulnerability. It just instantly wins so many encounters in the game. This is just one of the best tools in your late game arsenal. Many late game encounters are just pure damage races. A lot of late game arenas just do damage to you that's unavoidable. Globe of Invulnerability completely shuts that down. It also lets you just cheese encounters by setting off gigantic explosions from explosive barrels safely. So Globe of Invulnerability just wins late game encounters on its own and is an incredible spell, but we're going to pick up both of them. Which order you pick these up in doesn't matter that much. Finally, at Sorcerer level 12, we get our last sorcery point and our last feat. For our feat, we are going to simply max out Charisma to increase our save DCs and hit chances to the maximum possible level. And then for our spell selection, we're going to take the other of Chain Lightning and Globe of Invulnerability to make sure that we have both our damage and our encounter-winning late-game effects online. Chain Lightning can just one-shot a lot of encounters if you cast it effectively, and Globe of Invulnerability just wins them, so together that will be your best tool in the late game. At this point also, don't forget that over these levels, if there's any spell that you find you aren't using at this stage, you can replace it. For example, you could replace Hold Person if you're only using Hold Monster. You could replace any of these lower level combat spells if you're only using higher level combat spells, and you can pick up any utility that your party is missing. Always keep that in mind as an option as you level up. That's one of the great things about Sorcerer, is you can pick up any of these spells in order to fill holes in your party. Alright, that is our level 1 to 12 build, but of course we can make this character more powerful with proper item selection, and if we want to, by multiclassing, so let's talk about that next. For items for this character, well, one of the great things about Sorcerer is that they are almost completely item independent. Sorcerers are just so inherently powerful, and their leveling is so smooth that they don't particularly need any items to make up for downsides of the class, because the class has very few downsides, and they don't particularly need any items to increase the strengths of the class, because those strengths are already so strong. However, there are two stats that they really do want from items. One of those is Spell Save DC, and the other one is Initiative. The Fistbreaker Helm, therefore, is an excellent helmet for your characters, and any other items that give these stats are going to be for your Sorcerer, and any other items that give these stats are going to be heavily in demand for Sorcerers. Going first and making sure that your spells land is going to be incredibly powerful, and so any item that increases your save DC or your initiative roll is going to be premium for a Sorcerer. Another item that you should consider is some way to make yourself immune to falling over on ice surfaces or immune to being knocked down, like the Boots of Striding. You will become unable, therefore, to lose concentration on your spells at all by being knocked over. You're very good at passing saving throws, to passing concentration saves if you take damage, but in Baldur's Gate 3, any spellcaster who falls over immediately loses concentration on their spells without any saving throw at all, so the Boots of Striding can turn off the only fail case for your character. You also, because you are a sorcerer, are the best character in the game at using spells that are cast from items or scrolls, and so you want to be collecting as many scrolls and items with spells on them as possible. Even relatively marginal spells, like Scorching Ray from the Gloves of Cinder and Sizzle, a pretty weak spell overall, gains value on a sorcerer because you can quicken that alongside the other things that you're doing. Your sorcery metamagic can be used on spells cast from items. Particularly important ones include very powerful single target spells, because those can be twinned, gaining double value. Things like Disintegrate or Otto's Irresistible Dance, when cast from a scroll, you can double up on those with a sorcerer and cast 2 Otto's Irresistible Dances to immediately take 2 enemies out of combat without any saving throw at all. That's incredibly powerful, and so your sorcerer is usually going to be your character that's going to cast spells from scrolls and items, because it's just so good for them, and also you gain a benefit whenever you cast one of those spells of being able to fly. For your armor, you're either going to go with a robe that increases your spell save DC, or another good armor piece is the Elven Chain. If you are not a race that normally gets light armor proficiency, the Elven Chain, you're always proficient, so you can still cast spells while you're wearing it, and it gives you additional initiative, which of course is very important. If you do have light armor proficiency and shield proficiency, then you can go with the with any shield, like Ketheric's shield or the Sentinel shield that increases your save DC or initiative. I know I'm saying this a lot, but that's all sorcerers care about. Though those will typically be more in demand by other spellcasters, because sorcerers have really good item options to increase those regardless. A couple other items that are worth mentioning are, in the early game, the Bracers of Defense can increase your armor class just a little bit, making it a little bit harder for enemies to hit you and just discouraging them from doing so. Alongside Shield, those will help keep you alive in the early game. And because we're going to be doing a lot of cold damage, probably, the Snowburst Ring can give you a lot of free ice surfaces and is very good for this character as well. Finally, in the end game, the best in slot weapon for this character is going to be Marka Heshkir. You will usually set it to Lightning, and that will give you a free cast of Chain Lightning once per short rest, and that's the 6th level spell, so that is incredibly powerful. And at time of recording, this is bugged, and while normal Chain Lightning can't be twinned, the Marka Heshkir Chain Lightning can be twinned, which just lets you deal 4 times as much damage because of how the Chain Lightning arcs intersect with one another, so that massively increases the damage output of this character. Even without that bug, though, Marka Heshkir's ability to refresh your level 6 spell slot and give you additional free cast of level 6 spells, as well as increase your damage, spell save DC, and attack rolls, means it's the best item for this character, and this character is the best character to use this item, which is a very important consideration, because it's one of the best items in the game. Other than that, though, the Sorcerer is very item independent, and there's really not much that you need in the way of items. Just increase your save DC and initiative as much as possible, and you won't conflict with the rest of your party for high-value items, so you can get away with... so your Sorcerer will give you the value without requiring much from your party, which is one of the great things about the class. Finally, for multi-class options for this character, there are a lot of levels in other classes that can benefit your Sorcerer significantly. First off, because we're a Charisma-based class, we can benefit a lot from multiclassing with any of the other Charisma-based classes in just about any combination of levels. Bards, Paladins, and Warlocks all combine extremely well with Sorcerers, and I have videos up for those combinations if you're interested in learning more about those. Although one that's really worth paying attention to as a 1-level dip for Sorcerers is a single level of Warlock for the Fiend Warlock subclass. Not for the subclass abilities, but because Fiend Warlock gets access to Command, which is incredibly powerful for a Sorcerer, just one of the best spells in the game, and right away, at very early levels, gives you the ability to just drop whole groups of enemies. Quickened Command or Extended Command in the late game synergize extremely well with Sorcerer. And, of course, you also get Eldritch Blast, so you just get a very good combat cantrip, even if you only take one level and don't get Agonizing Blast, Eldritch Blast is still just a lot of good damage, so you can benefit a lot from a single Warlock level. Another option for a single level is to take one level of Cleric. Now this is a little bit complicated because of how Baldur's Gate calculates save DCs from items and scrolls. If you take a level of Cleric as your second level, it's going to break the save DC on your items and scrolls because of the unintuitive way in which it works, where that's calculated based on the class you took your most recent level 1 of. So if you take Sorcerer at level 1, Cleric at level 2, and then Sorcerer for the rest of the way, all your items will use your Wisdom for their save DC, so you do have to be careful with the ordering if you're taking Sorcerer, maybe if you're taking a level of Cleric, or just accept that a different character is going to have to use your items. On the other hand, you get a huge amount out of Cleric levels. You get Guidance, which makes you even better at conversation skills, as well as Thaumaturgy, which makes you even better at conversation skills. You also get, for example, with Life Domain, you get a lot of utility from Healing Word, and so on. You get the Bless spell, which is a very good spell, and you get Heavy Armor and Shield proficiency, making your character much, much harder to kill, so one level of Cleric can help with that. A single level of Fighter can do the same thing, giving you Heavy Armor and Shield proficiency. If you don't care about dialogue skills, you can take it at level 1 and still have Constitution saves, so 1 Fighter level is really good, gets you the defense fighting style, and 2 Fighter levels gets you Action Surge, letting you manipulate the action economy even further. Those are my recommended 1-level dips, but there's also another one that's worth mentioning, which is 1 level of Wizard, which uses how Baldur's Gate calculates what spells wizards can learn from scrolls to gain access to every wizard spell. Wizards learn spells from scrolls in Baldur's Gate based on their total caster level, not their wizard level. So a single wizard level and 11 sorcerer levels lets you learn effectively every spell in the game, every wizard spell in the game, and quicken and multicast them, twin them, etc. because you're a sorcerer, so you get all the versatility of a wizard and all the power of a sorcerer in a single character. You can also go with 2 levels of Cleric to maximize your lightning damage, and you can even combine those things in a build, which I did a video for, called the One-Shot Lightning Lord, to gain 6th level spellcasting from wizard levels, maximize lightning damage from clerics, and quicken spells from sorcerer, all in a single character. So there's a lot of different ways you can multi-class your sorcerer, but overall, if you're looking to build a sorcerer as a primary sorcerer character, the main multi-class options that you're going to be looking at are 1 level of Warlock for command, 1 level of Wizard for spell access, 1 level of Cleric for armor and utility, and 1 or 2 levels of Fighter for armor and possibly Action Surge. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Sorcerer, and as always, if you have, please feel free to leave a comment and like the video. Both of those things help me out a ton with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do so. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends. I'll catch you next time.